There's Paddy.
Yeah, he's there now. That's great. All right. Shall we get started? Because it's 2 minutes past and we just want to try and keep it under the hour. So that's grand. Okay. So I just want to thank you all for joining today. Today's webinar is brought to you from Carrick Veterinary Centre and Elanco Animal Health. My name is Carol Fitzgerald and I'm the Veterinary Business Manager for Elanco East Ireland. And I'd like to thank Paddy and the team for inviting us here today. So I'd like to introduce our Elanco Technical Vet Advisor, Wesley Power. As I said, Wesley is our Technical Vet Consultant for Ireland. He's a sheep farmer and also a beekeeper. So Wesley is going to talk us through what ketosis is and how it impacts on Irish farms. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat box at the bottom of the screen. Just type in what you want. And we're going to have a Q&A at the end of the session as well. So put your questions in there or you can ask at the end. So thank you very much and I will pass it over to Wesley.
Thanks, Carol. Thanks to Paddy and your practice for inviting us along today and for organising the meeting. And indeed yourself, Carol, for all the work you've done in the background. We'll try and get through this in about 40 minutes or about 50 minutes, just to keep on track for the hour, so that we have some questions at the end. So we're going to talk today about ketosis, and I suppose our key message is that this is a common condition on Irish dairy farms. And towards the end of the presentation, what I'll go through is a study that we've carried out in Ireland to show that it is common and indeed how we can manage it in Irish dairy herds. So the first thing I suppose we need to look at is just, when we're talking about cows, where do they get their energy from? Okay. So very simply, obviously, most of the time they're going to get their energy from the food that they eat. And this food is going to be grass, silage, concentrates, total mixed ration, whatever you're feeding. And obviously this food's taken into the rumen, and the bugs within the rumen are then generating glucose. And glucose is the primary energy source that cows use for maintenance of their own body health and body function, and obviously also for milk production. There will be times, so besides the food, they also have body fat stores. So even the thinnest cows on a farm will have some fat stores. And these fat stores are basically reserves. So in times of stress, in times of need, the cow can rely on these fat stores. And basically what happens is that the fat is moved to the liver and the liver converts that into glucose. Okay. But the key thing is that this body fat store should only be used as a reserve. And there's a big balancing act going on between the dry matter intake and the fat stores within the cow in terms of where the energy production should come from. And I suppose throughout this talk, one of the key things we will address or try to continue to remember is dry matter intake, or the appetite that the cow has. And what we want to try to do is to maximize that appetite at all stages during production. So in 95% of the time, if we look at the balance on the left-hand side of the screen, most of the energy the cow gets or needs or requires is going to come from her dry matter intake. She will just use the fat stores from time to time and intermittently to generate energy in times of stress when she needs it. The only difference, or the biggest difference to this balance, occurs just at the end of the dry cow period, as the cow goes from being a dry cow and starting to lactate after she calves down. So what happens in that particular period of time is that her appetite actually decreases, and we'll explain why in a minute. But her appetite decreases, so her dry matter intake goes down, so less of the energy that she requires comes from the food and more of it comes from her fat stores. So she mobilizes these fat stores to generate more energy because she's not eating enough to maintain the energy that she requires. And this is absolutely fine. It occurs in all dairy cows, but we only want it to occur for a day or two after she calves. And the reason for this is that when a cow mobilizes body fat, she will produce some byproducts. So she will get energy, but she'll also produce some byproducts. And one of these byproducts is what we call ketones. And when you have excess ketones, that's going to make the cow feel unwell. And she's not going to be as productive as she should be without having ketones in her bloodstream. So why, I suppose then you might ask, why does ketosis occur when a cow, around the time of when a cow calves? And it's really very simple. There's a calf developing inside her abdomen, and the calf is reaching maximum size just before she calves. So if you think about it, the calf is in the cow's abdomen, and it's occupying a very large space in there. So the rumen just simply doesn't have enough space to allow it to fill to its maximum capacity. So rumen fill decreases, and this has a direct effect on reducing her appetite. So at the point of calving, her appetite is at its lowest, and yet the day after she calves, the minute she calves, she's going to start producing milk. And so at the time when she needs more energy, she's eating less. And this is where we talk about the cow having a negative energy balance. And all this simply means is that the energy that she's using is not matched by the energy that she's taking in. And this is primarily down to the fact that she immediately starts to milk after calving. So this negative energy balance means that because she's not eating enough to get energy, she's going to utilize more body fat stores. And if she does this excessively, then she's going to produce excessive amounts of ketones. And when a cow has excessive amount of ketones in her bloodstream, that's when we say that they have ketosis. Okay. And remember, in the short term, this is fine, but if this goes on for days after calving, this has negative consequences on production for the cow and on the cow's welfare as well. So what are those negative consequences? Well, very simply, there are three things that we need to consider. We will get reduced milk production. We will, or it will be more difficult to get the cow back in calf. And there's also there's a whole myriad of secondary health conditions that can occur because of ketosis. Like, she's more likely to get a twisted womb. She's more likely to retain her afterbirth. She's more likely to develop a womb infection, mastitis, lameness. All of these things become more likely to occur if a cow has got prolonged negative energy balance and has prolonged episodes of ketosis. So I suppose the next question then we have to answer is, how can we as vets, we as Elanco and you as farmers address this on farm? And I suppose the easiest thing the easiest way to summarize it is to continuously to do everything we can to focus on appetite. Okay, so the things we've developed a number of tools in Elanco to help you as a farmer and to help paddy and vets within practices to address issues on farm that we know affect cow comfort and therefore have a direct effect on appetite. On the left-hand side of the screen here, you can see we have this healthy starts checklist. So this is just a number of points that you can address on your farm around housing, feeding, watering, cow movement, etc. within the herd. And what it does is it allows you just to assess it and risk assess it and to see where can you make changes that you can maximize cow comfort. Happy cows means that they're going to have more time eating, more time ruminating, more time lying down and preparing themselves in the dry cow period for lactation. The other thing that we've produced is a body condition scorecard. This is a laminated card that it's very easy to read, and it's a very simple process to use on farm. And these, I suppose, body condition scoring would be essential at a number of times during the production cycle. But when we talk about the body condition score in the dry period, the best time to kind of analyze this is just before the cow is dried off. So in kind of the latter stages of lactation. And you're aiming to have your cows to have a body condition score of about 3 to 3.5. Okay, any cow that has a body condition score more than 3.5 is considered fat. Okay, and remember, fat cows are probably the cows that are most at risk of ketosis, because these are the cows that have the capacity to mobilize more body fat, and because of that, they're the cows that have the possibility of generating more ketones. So these tools are available. If anybody wants to get their hands on these, just let Paddy know, or indeed or Carol know, and we can get these tools out to you. So I suppose the key points in what we've looked at already is that ketosis is a very common problem on farms, and I'll detail a study that we carried out in Ireland in 2019 in a few minutes just to show how common it is. But it's also a hidden disease. So remember, cows that have ketosis are going to be walking around in your herd, and they're going to look from the outside like they're completely normal, okay? But it's a hidden disease. But we know that if you blood sample these cows after they calve, that a certain percentage of them will have excess ketones in their bloodstream. So if you do everything possible to maximize appetite through management on your farm, through using the checklist and the body condition scoring that I've just talked about, even if you have the best management systems, there will always be what we call outliers. And these outliers are cows that are at increased risk from the point of view of ketosis. So how can you as a farmer target these or find these cows in your herd? Which cows are the ones that are most likely to be at risk of ketosis? And if there's one slide, I suppose, that you remember out of the whole presentation today, it's to remember the word soft, okay? So soft stands for sick cows, old cows, fat cows, and twins. So sick cows are any cow really in the previous lactation that was unwell for any reason. Particularly, that every farmer will know a couple of cows off the top of his head that just caused lots of problems the year before. If they're still in the herd and they haven't been culled, then these are cows that you could target with Kextone. Second group are the old cows. The third group, and probably the easiest group to identify, one of the easiest groups to identify, are the fat cows. So again, these are the cows that have a body condition score greater than 3.5 during the dry cow period. These are the cows that have more fat to mobilize and therefore have the greater possibility of producing excessive ketones. And the last group are those that are scanned in calf to twins. So again, these are easy to identify. So just remember, targeting cows, you use the SOFT acronym, and I suppose the fat cows and the twins are probably the easiest cows to kind of identify on farm. And in the study that I'll show you towards the end of the presentation that we did in 2019 in County Tipperary, we can show that by using Kextone and targeting soft cows within your herd with Kextone, that you can get a 7-to-1 return on investment. So I suppose, what is Kextone? So Kextone is a bolus, which you can see here on the left-hand side of the screen. It's within the plastic bolus container. There are a number of tablets that are stacked up on top of each other, and at the bottom there's a spring. And when you bolus this into the rumen, it remains there, and over a period of 95 days, it will release the tablets and slowly release the active ingredient. The active ingredient is a product called Monensin, which has been around for decades. But this technology allows it to be released over a 95-day period. So you bolus the cow, ideally 3 to 4 weeks before she calves. And therefore, from that point of bolusing, then you have 95 days coverage. There's zero meat and milk withdrawal. And as I said, we have over 30 years experience in Monensin and using this. So how does it work within the cow? So you bolus it into the cow, it ends up in the rumen. And the idea is that obviously it stays in the rumen and is not regurgitated up in the cud. So this is why we have these long wings attached to the bolus to try and reduce the incidence of it being regurgitated. Over a 95-day period, the spring within the bolus releases the tablets, and this gives roughly equivalent daily dose of 223 milligrams every day over a 95-day period. And what this simply does is there's lots of different groups of bacteria within the rumen, and what we do with Monensin is we preferentially drive the population of bacteria towards those that are more efficient at producing glucose. Okay, so we make it easier for them to survive and to grow and develop in the rumen, and that means that you get more efficient conversion of every kilogram of dry matter into glucose. That means more energy, and that means the less chance of a cow having to mobilize body fat and therefore of actually developing ketosis. So I hope that makes sense. If anybody at any stage has questions, as Carol said, you can stick them in the chat box, or indeed, you can always pass them on to Paddy, and we can try and address them for you afterwards. So in the last few slides, really, what I want to do is I just want to detail the study that we carried out in 2019 here in Ireland. And I suppose this was carried out to provide direct evidence that this is a disease that is common in Ireland, a condition that's common in Ireland, and that needs addressing on dairy farms to maximise efficiency and to maximise production. So just to give you a bit of a background on the farms that were used in this study. So we looked at 5 family-run spring calving dairy herds in the Neenah area of County Tipperary. The average yield across the 5 farms was just over 6,500 litres. And the farm size varied from the smallest farm with 82 cows to the largest farm with 409 cows. So in total, we enrolled just over 1,100 cows in the study. So in the spring of 2019, just to give you an idea of how we ran the study, we had a computer program that randomly placed the cows into 2 groups. So one group was to receive Kextone, and one group was to receive no Kextone. Okay. The Kextone group received the Kextone bolus 3 to 4 weeks before calving, and at the same time as that, kind of middle of the dry cow period, all of the cows both in the Kextone group and in the control group, they all had their body condition score taken at that stage. Then 5 to 11 days after calving, every single cow of the 1,127 of them had a blood sample taken to measure BHP, which is just one particular type of ketone. Okay, and they also had their body condition score checked again at this stage. And any cow who had a BHP level or a ketone level above 1.2 on the meter we were using was considered to be positive for ketosis. So briefly, what did we find? So yes, we proved that ketosis is a disease that occurs on Irish dairy farms. So just because cows in Ireland spend most of their time grazing grass does not mean that they don't get ketosis. So the disease is common, and we found that the average incidence across the 5 farms, across those 1,127 cows, was approximately 27%. So that means nearly 1 in 3 of the cows had a blood score of 1.2 or greater at 5 to 11 days postpartum. And then what we also wanted to evaluate was the effect of Kextone on this particular population of cows. And we showed that the incidence of ketosis decreased by 76% across these 5 herds. And that is very consistent with other published data that we have where the effect of Kextone is always in the mid-70s in terms of percentage reduction. So again, just to reiterate, what are the negative consequences of ketosis? Decreased milk production, decreased fertility, and an increased chance of developing secondary diseases like twisted stomachs, metritis, mastitis, lameness, etc. And these 3 negative consequences we know about them because of a plethora of studies by lots of different research organizations, by lots of different companies over the last probably 3 decades. So we're very, very aware of the negative consequences of cows with ketosis. But just to try to put it into an Irish specific context and to try to outline, I suppose, what it costs you as a farmer in Ireland, let's just first of all look at reduced yield. So there are a number of studies that show that when a cow has ketone levels above 1.2 after calving, that those cows are considered to be ketotic, those cows will produce on average about 350 litres less milk over a 305-day lactation. So if we are looking at an average lactation of 305 days, they're producing 350 litres less milk. So on a daily basis, that equates to 1.2 litres less milk. Now, if we go then and look at the ICMSA milk price tracker from 2019 to look at an Irish specific costing for what this is costing you as a farmer, in April 2019, an average milk price across Ireland, across all the milk suppliers, was about 29 cents per litre. So that 1.2 litres of less milk per day equates to a 35-cent decrease in your income, I suppose, or in your revenue as a farmer. So over a 305-day lactation, that's 107 euros. So if we then go and look at reduced fertility, We know from speaking to the veterinary practice in Nina that was involved with this study, and from speaking to other farmers, that the 6-week in calf rate is a statistic or a stat that's used quite commonly on dairy farms in Ireland. So we wanted to come up with some costings around that particular stat and reduce fertility. And what we know from a number of published papers is that if a cow has a ketone level above 1.2 millimoles per litre after calving, those cows have got about a 7% decrease in their 6-week in calf rate. Okay, compared to cows, say, who are normal and who have ketone levels that we would consider to be normal. Togish did some work a number of years ago, and Chalou and his group produced a paper that costed how much it cost you as a farmer for every 1% decrease in the 6-week in calf rate. And they estimated this to be just over €8 per cow. So every 1% decrease in 6-week in calf rate costs €8 per cow. So that means a 7% decrease, which happens in cows with ketone levels above 1.2, is estimated to cost about €56 per cow. And then finally, as we said, the third consequence of ketosis is secondary disease. So there's an increased risk of twisted stomachs, retained placenta, metritis, the whole lot of things that you can see on the left-hand side of the screen there. And this has been estimated to cost up to €92 per cow. So if we put all that together this is the last slide I think we have. Well, if we put all that together as a total cost per cow, it's coming up at €255 per affected cow, per affected ketotic cow. So that's €107 for milk, €57 for fertility, and up to €92 for health. Okay, by the fact that these cows are not going to develop LDAs, they're not going to develop metritis, mastitis, and other issues, or I should say are less likely to do so. So if we then go and look at the cost of a Keckstone bolus, so across Ireland today, the average cost is about €35. So if you treat a ketotic cow, it's costing you as a farmer €35. And if you look at your return on investment, it's €255, or up to €255. So that's a 7-to-1 return on investment, which I think anybody would be fairly happy with. And I think the key thing is that we have put this together from an Irish study. And the last thing that I would say before I kind of take any questions or before anybody wants to say anything else is just that when we carried out the study in Tipperary on those 5 farms, it was carried out in 2019, and 2019 was a very good spring. Okay, on the 5 test farms that we had, all the cows on all 5 farms were out on the pasture. Were basically turned out on pasture a couple of days earlier in 2019 than they had been in 2018. The temperatures were higher, grass growth was better. So in theory, the cows should have been under less stress because they weren't housed for as long. But still, we had an incidence rate of 27%. So the disease is there, the disease is common, and the effects from an economic and for a welfare point of view are documented not just by Elanco, but by a lot of different sources. So with that, I thank you all for tuning in, and if there's any questions, Carol will try to filter them through and we'll try and take them now. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Wesley, for that brilliant presentation. We will have some published, I'll be sending them to Paddy soon, just some information about that study down in Tipperary, so I can email that out, put it on the WhatsApp group for you to have a look at it if you're interested. If you have any questions, you can unmute yourself now, or like I said, down the bottom, there's a chat box down there, you can type in your messages. So, thank you very much.
The other thing to say, I suppose, is that healthy start checklist is something that is freely available, and also the body condition score chart. The body condition scoring chart uses one particular body condition scoring system. There are a number of systems out there, but the one we use is one developed by Penn State University in the US, and it's a little bit more straightforward and easier to use, I think. But it doesn't matter what system you use, as long as you use the same system consistently throughout the herd. and from time to time, so that you kind of get used to using the same process. But you know, if there's anything else, as I said, you can take out of this today, is just remember the word soft, and that will allow you to target cows with Keystone boluses efficiently.
Great, thank you. I think Paddy, you're unmuted there now. You can say hello.
Thanks very much, Wesley. Thanks very much, Carl. I suppose with these block-based calving systems in the spring, body condition score is paramount to success in milk yield graphs over the year, fertility, and health. So I suppose the Keystone is a tool that can target fat cows, as you say, soft cows. Also maybe a tool that could target, Leslie, thin cows that can't afford. I suppose they would be maybe classified as the sick cows, maybe, that can't afford to lose any more weight. But it's going to affect your fats, your proteins, your lactation graph, your speed of getting back in calf. And, you know, I know, Wesley, it's been used quite a bit with Holsteins. I think we're missing a trick, but these, hybrid type here. But what percentage would you target in a herd, or is that a stupid question, or does it depend from year to year, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it does depend. I mean, I think your point on thin cows is a very relevant one, Paddy. They are at risk as well, but they are usually the sick ones, or the ones that have caused trouble in the previous lactation. I mean, when we look at the study that we did in Tipperary, 5% of the cows were classified as thin on a body condition score. About 15% of them were fat, and then the other 80% of cows were optimal body condition score. So I suppose rather than us dictating a percentage per 100 cows, say, it's easier, I think, at farm level if farmers can just remember the SOFT acronym. It's a lot easier, and the twins and the fat cows are the easiest ones to kind of pick up on. And they're the ones that are definitely at higher risk because of fat cow. And the other thing is, you will get, actually, we mentioned an average increase in milk production of 305 litres there in the presentation. But the fat cows will produce more milk when you give them Keystone than the optimum and the thin cows will. Okay, and the reason for that, if you think about it, is that those cows have got two safety systems. They're able to, because you're giving them Keystone, they're not going to get ketotic. So their appetite is going to be maximized. So they're going to be producing as much,
we're losing you there
as much as they can, and generating energy from that. Sorry, can you hear me?
We just lost you there for about 20 seconds. Can you repeat that?
Sorry, yeah. No, the fat cows in general have a greater tendency to produce more milk over the optimum and the thin cows. And this is down to the fact that they have two different energy sources. Their appetite is maximized because they're not ketotic, but also because they're fat, they can use a bit more fat than other cows to generate an extra source of energy. So, but I think in terms of a percentage to target, it's more looking at your own system and trying to remember the SOFT acronym and using body condition scoring really to the maximum. I think Paddy, you also mentioned about breed there. You know, the cows in the study that we did in Tipperary were what we would consider to be kind of average cows in the Republic of Ireland. You know, when you look at the cows across the herd, they weren't these large, very, very high yielding Holstein cows. You know, these were the cows that you'll see all over the Republic. You know, it's just to prove the point that ketosis is an issue even with these cows. They don't have to be high yielding cows. It still will occur because of the whole metabolism that occurs within dairy cows around the point of calving.
That's great.
Okay, thanks very much.
Have we any other questions? I don't have anything in the chat box, so if that's everything, I am recording this, so I will send this to Paddy and he can share it with the group if people haven't had a chance to view it today. But we just like to thank everybody that attended and hope you found it useful. And again, talk to Paddy if you have any queries about Keckstone. And thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks, Paddy.
Thank
Thanks
you.
very much.
Take care.
You.
Bye.
Bye-bye.